Hi, this is Cora Stack again, Dr. Stack. I just wanted to clear the screen there and just to tell you my story because I think it's important. It's a horrific story, to be honest. It's absolutely horrific, and it's like filling the blanks. I'm beginning to piece it all together now and to search to see what really the story is. Really, that I've been treated as a whistleblower like Garda McCabe for years, but in a much worse way because of the nature of the whistleblowing research that I did in good faith years ago, just curiosity driven research. It doesn't make you rich, that's for sure. So, my story, whistleblowing, constitutional duty, and institutional retaliation. On I'm working on this paper and I have a draft up on academia.eu, but it's only a draft, so there's a lot to come into this yet. This is a really tiny version of it, but it's just for this kind of YouTube sort of video. So my name, as you know, is Dr. Cora Stack, and thanks very much for the beautiful comments. And I'm so, privileged to have such a fantastic people with me on this journey on YouTube. I never, or indeed in LinkedIn and Facebook, I never expected my academic research to change my life or to tear it apart and to ruin me completely almost. Well, just about, almost. But when I uncovered systemic failures inside Ireland's whistleblowing system, I believe I had a constitutional duty to speak up. Now, I'm hearing, no democracy and corruption and dictatorship and traitorship, and I was shocked to read the amount of it because I thought I was the only one like that spotted this, or that was the target of all this abuse, and it's widespread, sadly. And it's the disillusionment and the disillusionment and the brokenness in people as a result of this sort of thing. And I can empathise usually because it happened to me. I don't know how I've lived, really, how I've survived it. And once I'm thriving, but I'm on the way back. I thought the state would do the right thing. Instead, every institution I turned to closed its doors. Well, they all had an agenda because I was seen as a researcher in whistleblowing who had to be silenced and who had to have every door shut, every right up. But the worst that was done to me was the turning of my children against me, and they all colluded in doing this. That was the worst thing they did, and I thought it was just one party or one family. No, there was a whole lot of actors doing this, and they supported the violence, psychological violence of my children. They were doing it to upset me, but what they've really done was years and years of psychological violence of my children. It's reprehensible what they did. I thought it was just one actor or a family of actors. No, there was a whole load of them in it. It's very clear to me now. I thought the state would do the right thing. Instead, allegedly, every institution I turned to closed its doors. This is my story, the story of what happened when I told the truth. So it's very sad indeed, particularly given that I'm almost certain that there was widespread collusion against me, and I was the cold and so on, and put in my pulse records, and they won't give me on my pulse records, and there's a shop that I get ink in, and it's just refusing me ink for ages. So somebody don't give her ink and that sort of thing. That's this nonsense. So because we don't want to write to anyone to report us, this sort of thing. So I've been able to print anything for a long time. So in 2020, or around then, shortly before that, I finished a major research report or project on examining the implementation of the Protective Disclosures Act. That was the Whistleblowing Act, introduced in Ireland and enacted 2014. And what I found was shocking. Across public bodies, TUSLA, local authorities, education, higher education, government departments, everywhere, the HEA, all those bodies everywhere. The law simply was not being followed. Now, I'm not saying that people knew the law was not being followed. It just wasn't being followed. Now, I think solicitors were behind this, and perhaps maybe chief executives, to try, the solicitors were going around advising the employers, in inverted commas, that this was a majorly powerful law that had to be, kept from the people, basically hidden. So I suspect there were major firms in Dublin behind this, and those major firms were probably behind the treatment of me in the recent court case. We won't name anyone, one particular record. Got great satisfaction out of the judge, doing the right thing by them, with all the coding. So we won't mention any names, but one or two of them are well known. for being very aggressive towards clients. So I documented, several serious concerns, very serious concerns about omissions, and a huge amount of the rights that are addressed were not included in the, in the reporting, the internal reporting mechanisms or documents and so on, and that people that would be reading the internal disclosures policies wouldn't have a clue about their rights or redress or entitlements, and these were all actions. They were deliberately hidden from staff or employees so that they wouldn't know their rights, and that, and then the investigations were all gaslighted in favour of the employer, which is usually the case. So the employer can bring in loads of solicitors, and then the person who makes the disclosure has nobody. Maybe they do have union people now, but then they had nobody. So it was a completely imbalanced system. So I raised all these proper things, and the minister just wrote me a letter and thanked me, and I wanted to be protected. But he made a right fool out of me. But anyway, we'll see now who the fool was when this who really was the fool, him or me, or what he did was disgraceful, and he's now he's further afield. So hoping no one will ever discover this. So, but he must have had a few sleepless nights doing this on behalf of the Irish people and whistleblowers and democracy. I'd say he'd have a few sleepless nights, and he's earning a fortune if it's in. I documented no proper reporting channels, statutory deadlines, ignored disclosures, buried in widespread misunderstanding of legal duties, including widespread acts of omission. So it wasn't random, it was structural. So I submitted my findings to the minister, concerned at the time, responsible for this policy, for the whistleblowing legislation, and I believe my research would be treated as a protected disclosure. It wasn't, and that decision changed everything that followed. A constitutional turning point. When my submission wasn't treated as a protected disclosure, the state avoided investigation, it avoided oversight, it avoided judicial review, and it avoided accountability. A constitutional question arose: can the executive decide the legality of its own actions? This is really what happened, But this is what happens when people have too much power. There's no oversight. And even the protective disclosures, I'm questioning whether that is sufficiently, has that sufficient oversight, or are they reluctant to put disclosures in places where they're legally obliged to, but won't in case of, them getting retaliation. So they won't send the disclosures to where they should do in case, they'd offend their bosses. I mean, what kind of a system is that? So you have no oversight. And so the Protective Disclosures Act only applies to to people who are not powerful. The answer is no. But what happened in my case? The research was quietly buried. Well, it wasn't buried. It was very well used and abused. Instead of fixing the failures I identified, the government passed the Protective Disclosures Amendment Act 2022. It was presented as, of course, strengthening the law. In reality, it narrowed definitions, created new barriers, insulated institutions, and ensured disclosures could be administratively contained. And this is what they've been trying to do for me for years, to contain me, using every possible institution in the country to try and contain me from seeking my rights under the Constitution, including my rights, my human rights, my legal rights, everything. Every possible right has been taken from me because of the retaliation. Because somebody decided I was to be targeted, and a code went around, and there's a code I believe in the Pulse, the Garda Pulse, blocker, every possible, and the guards are in everywhere, whether it's the guards or a private investigator or people like this that are in everywhere. Don't do this, don't do that, don't help her, don't help her, don't help her. This is what's going on, and blocker. So this is what so the guards have blocked down the phone regularly, and then friends are afraid to contact me because they're afraid all my stuff was all wired. So the new office of the Commissioner has no investigative powers. It's a post box, not a safeguard. Somebody came up to me recently. They thought that was hilarious. The post box analogy. My research was not acted upon. Instead, the law was reshaped to make it easier to suppress. Judicial distortion and media damage, and then fast forward. When I saw Judicial Review recently, following concerns about constitutional issues, including what happened, and of course I didn't really, it didn't twig about the commissioners until I was going around the circle of the president. So it was a great place for your mind to. Focus on, there's a problem here, I haven't resolved it, and I got a few papers out of my field candidacy, and that I had no support and all this sort of thing, all this coding that was used by the council, complaining and all this. It was all coding, to the council, it was all an act like a theatre. And I was watching thinking, are these crazy people, these people on the other side using these codes and thinking I won't spot them. I mean, is this what goes on? Were there any codes to the judge that the litigant can't understand? Legal language, inverted commas, theatre. So when I sought Judicial Review performance, that's what it's called, performance, the courts didn't engage with the constitutional issues. My case was reframed, minimised, distorted, and we call that judicial. It was severely gaslighted. I mean, the way it was like the judge got a knife and just charged everything, charged it, and it was out. It's really sadistic gaslighting. Gosh, it was desperate. I mean, I almost got a nervous breakdown from the sages of it and the cruelty in it and the minimisation, and like he wouldn't be the base complete to me, that judge, intellectually. Well, morally, he doesn't like to do that. Somebody like me, morally, he's morally bankrupt, in my opinion. That's moral bankruptcy, allegedly, said Judge. So the Irish Times, then, the worst of it then is the way the Irish Times deserved the RT News and Euronews. Maybe they were all, waiting for his judgment. Maybe they were all waiting, I'll sort you out. Maybe it was all collusion. This is what a lot of people are saying. I mean, I don't know. Published stories portraying more carefully constructed constitutional errors entirely baseless. I mean, once he put those words in, he knew that they would make the headlines. You see, it was all choreographed. I mean, this is really life. And he thought I wouldn't spot it, or the council, the opposing council with all her codes. Oh, she was desperate altogether. They were all laughing when the judge delivered his brilliant judgment with all this rubbish in it. They did the gaslighting. Oh, she was desperate. But as I found out, this is routine for litigants, but it was just exceptionally bad because it was on the eve of the presidential election. Their reporting was not only inaccurate, it misled voters and destroyed the credibility of my research. It was devastating, but also it destroyed the credibility of our constitutional challenge. We had a really good constitutional challenge. It was top class, and that judge he knows I'm top class. And what he seemed to enjoy this sadistic cruelty. See, the problems when they're doing this stuff in the courts all the time, they become that way, they go that way. So it's just him that needs to be going to the doctor, not me. Anyway, we can't do anything about his state of mind. We could just maybe alert the courts that this man needs substantial help along with another man. They're the heavies. They're known as the heavies in the High Court. The heavies need a lot of psychological help. During the presidential nomination period, an unprecedented thing happened. Not one independent candidate received a single council nomination. Now that, my hypothesis, that was to do with the Fine Gael bloc, and which was a directive seen by RTE that Fine Gael councillors were not to vote against any independent candidate. Would that be against a whistleblower? Who would know all this stuff? Not one, including me. So the statistical probability of this is extremely low. No, my candidacy would have brought my research and its implications into the national conversation. That even what they did to change the law there is entirely unconstitutional. Now, mind the resulting law being unconstitutional. What they did was against the spirit of the Constitution, which were kind of, regulating themselves by turning a law which was unlawful into a lawful one, and weakening the powers of redress hugely. I mean, and being their own, not getting any, not going to the courts for the usual for undoing a law like that. So that was completely unconstitutional, and that's in some of my research there that's published. Instead, the entire pathway collapsed. Democracy requires genuine access to nomination. In 2005, that access did not exist. And so what happens when a whistleblower like me, and I didn't realise that I had a lot of adversity in the courts and things like that, and I can't say exactly what happened there, but seriously, it was all, I believe now, it was all choreographed, and that all my research was used to get me across a number of institutions, and this was the punishment. The institutional retaliation. So while I can't name individuals, but I can describe what happened to me. But now I can see it. Now it's like filling in the blanks. It's bang, 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 bang. Across multiple institutions, I experienced dismissal, silencing, minimisation, reputational damage, exclusion and barriers at every turn, not being believed, and the effect was retaliation, regardless of who or what caused it. My research became dangerous, not because it was wrong, but because it revealed uncomfortable truths. The destruction of my academic freedom. I've been an academic for nearly 30 years. I believe in evidence, truth and scholarly integrity. I mean, all of this pressure, would have an enormous effect on your ability to carry out your day-to-day duties. I don't know how I survived it. But once my research challenged state failures, my life collapsed gradually. I experienced an awful lot of, I was always, I think, very, very bright, and this, this caused people to kind of sideline me, and I suppose that's more of that's more of the retaliation, but that's retaliation because you're so smart. They can't take it. They can't take somebody getting any praise, when they know they're better than them, So they try and sideline them that way. So that was going on all the time as well. So I was dealing with that professional jealousy for years, as well as this institutional gaslighting and retaliation. So, cancellations, avoidance, loss of professional support, friendships and things like that. And people, I won't say suppression of research outputs, but up to before I moved to TUD, and a chilling effect across the academic environment. I was seen as a whistleblower and treated as such and excluded, because the people who are associated with the whistleblower, they might think their career would be, tarnished or affected. So my work wasn't treated as research, it was treated as a threat. Yet two people upheld academic integrity. One is Dr. Chris Hills of TU Dublin, and head of the mathematics and statistics department. The other is Dr. Richard Price, CEO of Academia. Both are Oxford and Cambridge doctorates from Oxford and Cambridge, so they're top brass in terms of qualifications, and they never silenced me. I was just fortunate, very fortunate. They protected my freedom to publish, and I will always be grateful to them. And I was very lucky to meet a very small number of the top brass that helped me over the years, and that they weren't able to get to. So what happens to your human rights here? What happened to me next went far beyond academic or legal issues. It affected my fundamental rights. I lost meaningful contact with my own children for years, and institutions did nothing. Again, I was seen as a whistleblower, and I had to be treated with the utmost cruelty. And what happened was that these people did not understand that not allowing children see their mother or their father, whichever, is extreme violence on children, which is now been recognised by Denmark. So they put the punishment of me before the protection of the children. And it was all part, I believe, of the retaliation because of the whistleblower. So I experienced denial of fair procedures, interference with my family life, suppression of expression, lack of effective remedy, repeatedly from the courts, some cumulative emotional and physical harm. The one judge that sided with me was a brilliant judge called Seamus Noonan. Absolutely outstanding. And it was not of this, like the Judge Higgins, Michael O'Higgins, a league of a judge that there are far too few of, far too few of. These are human rights violations, not abstract but lived. As I try to speak publicly, my online platforms become unstable. People have recently told me they couldn't like my videos, comments disappeared, and my content was impossible. Login attempts, altered settings, and sign of unwanted access. I mean, when I'm reading my PC here, I see sometimes 5 devices looking at it. I have a capture sheet here on my phone, and then it goes to 3 and 2 and 1, and this sort of thing. It's very scary. 5 or 6, 7 at one stage, and I don't know who's reading, who's doing it. But when you see 7, and I don't have 7,